This kid made poker history. This is Peter Eastgate, a 22-year-old kid from Denmark who showed up at the World Series of Poker with nothing but a dream and ice in his veins. He was known as the Iceman, not because he was cool under pressure, but because he showed absolutely no emotion. Zero. None. Even when millions of dollars were on the line. And in an interview just before the WSOP, Eastgate even described himself as a very unproductive and lazy guy. Well, that so-called lazy guy made poker history. I'm here to show you that he didn't just outplay the pros, he absolutely destroyed them. Let's get into it. Nearly 7,000 players risked $10,000 each at the 2008 World Series of Poker main event, battling for a $9.1 million prize and a chance to be forever remembered on the game's biggest stage. But at the final table, only 9 of the original 7,000 remained. In this first crucial hand, our boy found himself up against Chino Ream, a seasoned pro with over $1 million in career earnings and a reputation for fearless play. But Ream entered the play as the short stack, and the blinds were eating him alive. With a dangerously short stack, Ream was in survival mode. In poker, when your stack gets this low, you've got to make moves, and fast. Ream knew this, so when he looked down at Ace-King, one of the best starting hands in poker, he didn't hesitate. He shoved all in, putting his tournament life on the line. Eastgate, sitting with a comfortable stack, looked down at Ace-Queen. For most players, this is a relatively easy fold. Ace-Queen is a solid hand, but not a premium by any means. But Eastgate knew Ream was desperate. He called. The table fell silent as the 22-year-old slid his chips into the pot. Ream, confident in his Ace-King, nodded approvingly. But the flop took everyone by surprise. Eastgate spiked his queen, pairing it and taking the lead. Ream, now in trouble, needed a king to win. The turn brought the 9 of diamonds. No help for Ream. The river? A 4 of hearts. Game over.
A 4 of hearts, and that's going to do it. Peter Eastgate wins the pot and knocks off Chino Ream in 7th place. And the Danes are thrilled.
Ream's elimination sent shockwaves through the table. He was the last well-known pro left, and his exit signaled that Eastgate wasn't just there to make up the numbers. This kid was here to win. The next play came against Dennis Phillips, a trucking account manager turned poker sensation who was stealing the spotlight. With a legion of fans in red St. Louis Cardinals hats chanting his name, Dennis had been commanding the table for hours. His strategy? Unstoppable aggression. He raised, re-raised, and shoved with the confidence of a player who believed the cards would bend to his will. While Phillips huffed and puffed, the Iceman sat motionless, his face not showing any hint of emotion. He wasn't just waiting for a hand, he was waiting for the hand. And then it came. Pocket aces. The best starting hand in poker. Most players would slam all their chips into the pot here, screaming all in. But Eastgate? He didn't even blink. Instead, he tossed in a $1.4 million raise, a modest bet designed to look weak. To Phillips, this was an invitation. Eastgate knew Phillips couldn't resist attacking a small raise, especially with his stack and ego ballooning. Sure enough, Phillips glanced at his cards, ace-jack suited, and pounced. He re-raised to $3.2 million, flexing his aggression like a heavyweight throwing a jab. The 22-year-old didn't flinch. He flat-called, masking the strength of his hand. The message to Phillips? I'm weak, come at me. The flop landed. Deuce-king deuce, a dry, unremarkable hand that missed Phillips completely. No flush draws, no straight possibilities, just a lone king staring back at him. Phillips checked, a rare moment of hesitation. Eastgate saw his opening. He bet $3 million, a small but careful stab at the pot. To Phillips, this smelled like a bluff. After all, why would a player with a strong hand bet so timidly? In Phillips's mind, Eastgate was trying to steal the pot with air. So Phillips did what Phillips does. He increased. He raised to $7 million, slamming his chips down with the confidence of a man holding a king. His goal? To bully Eastgate out of the pot. But Eastgate wasn't bluffing. He wasn't even sweating. He'd spent hours studying Phillips's play, the way he overvalued aggression, the way he mistook boldness for brilliance. This wasn't just a poker hand, it was a psychological chess match. Eastgate paused for a beat, then shoved all in. The room buzzed. Phillips's face drained of color. His ace-jack was weak, and now he was staring down a bet that could badly hurt his stack. Finally, he folded. The crowd roared as the 22-year-old quietly stacked his chips, never revealing his aces. Behind him, his Danish fans started singing, which echoed through the theater.
That was the one table. I'll say this, I prefer it to the tomahawk chop. Oh, sounds pretty good.
And with that pot, Peter Eastgate does move to the top of the leaderboard.
Everyone at the table got the message. This kid wasn't just playing cards, he was playing the players. But the real showcase of Eastgate's skill came against Scott Montgomery in what would become one of the most dramatic hands of the tournament. Montgomery, a Canadian pro with a reputation for clawing his way back from the brink, was down to his last chips. He became desperate, and in poker, that can often lead to chaos. Eastgate, sitting comfortably with a mountain of chips, peeked at his cards. Pocket sixes. It wasn't a monster hand, but it was more than enough. Montgomery looked down at ace-3, a hand that's far from premium but good enough to gamble with when your stack is on life support. With the blinds climbing and his tournament life hanging by a thread, Montgomery did what any short-stack player would do. He shoved all in. Eastgate didn't hesitate. He slid his chips forward and the table braced for the showdown. The flop came, ace-4 queen. Montgomery's fans cheered loudly. He'd paired his ace, and Eastgate was now a huge underdog in this hand. The Canadian pro allowed himself a small smile. He was 2 cards away from doubling up and staying alive. But the Iceman didn't flinch. He wasn't out of the hand yet. The turn brought another ace, and Montgomery's smile widened. He now had a set, and Eastgate's chances of winning dwindled to a measly 2%. The crowd groaned. This looked like the end of the road for the young Dane. But poker is a cruel game. Just when you think you've got it locked up, the river card can turn your world upside down. The dealer burned a card and slowly revealed the river. The room exploded. Eastgate supporters leaped to their feet. Montgomery, who had been moments away from doubling up, slumped back in his chair, his face a mask of disbelief. Even Eastgate, normally ice-cold and emotionless, stood up from his seat to celebrate with his Danish supporters. The poker gods had blessed him, turning a near-certain loss into a miraculous win. Montgomery's dream of a WSOP title was over, and Eastgate's stack grew even larger. As players fell one by one, Eastgate's stack kept growing. But it wasn't just luck. His reading ability was incredible. Another hand began with Demidov in the small blind, holding king-7 suited. It wasn't a powerhouse hand, but in heads-up or short-handed play, a suited king can be gold. Demidov, ever the opportunist, decided to limp in, a move that signaled caution but also masked his intentions. Eastgate, in the big blind, looked down at 3-2 offsuit, one of the worst possible starting hands. He checked his option, and the 2 went to the flop. The flop came 7-3-6. Demidov hit top pair with his 7, while Eastgate spiked bottom pair with his 3. On the surface, Demidov was ahead, but Eastgate wasn't out of the fight. He had a pair, and in poker, even a small pair can turn into a monster if the cards go your way. Demidov checked, an interesting move for a player with top pair. Was he setting a trap, or was he unsure of Eastgate's strength? Eastgate, ever the predator, smelled opportunity. He bet $850,000, a small but deliberate wager designed to test Demidov's resolve. Demidov called, but the turn brought fireworks. Demidov now had a 2-pair, kings and 7s, and was a 19-1 favorite to win the hand. The crowd leaned in, sensing a pivotal moment. But instead of betting, Demidov checked again. This was a critical mistake. Eastgate, holding just a pair of 3s, checked back, buying himself a free river card that would change everything. Eastgate's bottom pair had turned into a set of 3s. Demidov, still holding 2-pair, bet half the pot, trying to extract value. But Eastgate wasn't just calling, he was planning. He paused. Then he raised to $5.5 million. Demidov appeared confident just moments ago, but now doubt crept in.
Doesn't talk much, but his chips never shut up. Demidov now trying to get a read on the 22-year-old. And at this stage of the championship, every bet, every decision so magnified.
Eastgate and Demidov have played a lot together at this main event, but Eastgate is one tricky character.
Is he bluffing? Demidov must have wondered. Or does he have 3s? The Russian pro agonized over the decision. After what felt like an eternity, Demidov folded. The crowd erupted.
Demidov at a critical moment against a strong opponent. And he lays down kings up.
Great fold from the 27-year-old Russian.
So Peter Eastgate picks up a couple of million new chips and inches a bit closer to Demidov. But right now, the chip leader is indeed playing like a champion at this main event.
Eastgate, ever the Iceman, quietly stacked his chips. With the game getting more intense, Eastgate found himself heads up in a pot against Elon Schwartz. A strong opponent with a knack for survival, Eastgate looked down at pocket fives, a modest hand by most standards. But in the hands of a player like Eastgate, even fives could be deadly. He raised to $1.5 million, a standard opening bet designed to thin the field. Elon Schwartz peeked at his cards. Ace-10. It was a decent hand, but not one you typically go to war with. Schwartz hesitated. He didn't want to play this hand, but the small blind forced his hand. Reluctantly, he called. The flop came Deuce-King-8, a dry board that missed Schwartz completely. His Ace-10 was now ace-high, and Eastgate's pocket fives were still ahead. Schwartz checked, hoping to see a free card. Eastgate, ever the strategist, checked behind. This wasn't a passive move, it was a trap. Eastgate knew Schwartz was capable of bluffing, and by checking, he invited Schwartz to take a shot at the pot. But Schwartz, perhaps sensing danger, stayed quiet. The turn, another king. Now the board read Deuce-King-8-King. Eastgate's fives were now two pair, kings and fives, while Schwartz was still holding ace-high. Schwartz checked again, and Eastgate pounced. He bet $1.7 million, a small but thoughtful wager designed to extract value. Schwartz, now in a tough spot, made the call. It was a reluctant decision, the kind of move you make when you're hoping for a miracle on the river. The river? 5 of diamonds. Eastgate's two-pair transformed into a full house, fives full of kings. Schwartz, still holding ace-high, checked. Eastgate didn't hesitate. He bet $4.6 million, a massive overbet that screamed strength. Schwartz, now hopeless, shoved all in. It was a bold move, but also a reckless one. With ace-high and 4 kings on the board, Schwartz was essentially bluffing into a monster. Eastgate didn't even think too much. "I call," he said, flipping over his full house. Schwartz's face fell as he mucked his cards. The crowd burst into cheers, but Eastgate showed less emotion, like it was just another day at the office.
Call. Schwartz hates that.
Ace high.
And that's not nearly good enough. With a full house, Peter Eastgate sends Schwartz to the rail. Fourth place and almost $3.8 million for Elon Schwartz.
If Eastgate doesn't hit the full house, maybe that check raise all-in works. And when he had the chip lead, I had visions of Elon Schwartz winning and moving to Mars.
The 2008 World Series of Poker main event final table had whittled down to its last 3 players. Peter Eastgate, the icy Danish prodigy, Ivan Demidov, the Russian phenom fresh off a third-place finish at the World Series of Poker Europe main event, and Dennis Phillips, the lovable amateur from St. Louis who had become the crowd favorite. Over $9 million and the coveted World Series of Poker bracelet were on the line, and the tension in the Penn and Teller's Theater was obvious. Phillips, the oldest player left, had defied the odds to make it this far, but now he was the short stack, facing 2 young Goliaths with monster chip stacks. Eastgate and Demidov were locked in a battle of wits, each trying to outmaneuver the other while Phillips fought to stay alive. The action folded to Eastgate on the button, who looked down at pocket threes. He raised to $1.5 million with the aim of stealing the blinds or building a pot if called. Phillips in the big blind glanced at his cards. 10-9 offsuit. It wasn't a premium hand, but Phillips was getting restless. He'd been folding for what felt like hours, and the blinds were eating away at his stack. He called, and the 2 players went heads up to the flop. The flop came as case threes, meaning a set for Eastgate, and Phillips had completely missed the board. No pair, no draw, just 10 high. Eastgate, first to act, bet $1.5 million, the same amount as his pre-flop raise. It wasn't a huge bet, but it was enough to put pressure on Phillips. Most players would fold here, but Phillips was in a tough spot. Folding meant losing more of his shrinking stack, but calling meant committing chips with a hand that had almost no chance of improving. Phillips stared at the board, then at Eastgate. The young Dane sat motionless. Phillips knew Eastgate was capable of bluffing, but he also knew how dangerous it was to tangle with him. "Eastgate is silent and lethal," the commentator said. And they were right. He barely spoke a word, but his chips did all the talking. Finally, Phillips made his move. "I'm all in," he declared, shoving his remaining chips into the pot. Eastgate didn't hesitate. "Call," he said, flipping over his set of threes. The crowd held its breath as the dealer prepared to reveal the turn and river.
Peter Eastgate is silent and lethal. And now the young whippersnapper staring down the old codger.
Phillips now.
It seems like an easy fold, but he's thinking about something.
I'm all in. I call.
Phillips all in and called. Wow.
You got a jack?
Oh, it's a lot worse than that.
Oh, I got to have runner to have anything.
Dennis Phillips, main event all but over. Fatigue may have been a factor. I think Elon Schwartz got fed up sitting around, and Dennis Phillips got tired too.
Dennis's sister's emotions mirror everyone here in a red cap.
I run good. I run very good.
Peter Eastgate poised for a heads-up match against Ivan Demidov.
I just couldn't keep folding. Had to do something.
Phillips needed running cards, a king and a queen or an 8 and a 7 to make a straight and stay alive. The turn card, an ace. It was the final nail in the coffin for Phillips, sealing his fate and leaving him with no outs to survive. Game over. As Phillips stood up to leave, the crowd gave him a standing ovation. He shook hands with Eastgate and Demidov, then turned to his supporters with a smile. "Well done," someone shouted.
You know, a king, a queen, an 8 or a 7 at least gives me a shot.
That's right.
All right, any of those 4 gives me a shot.
Dennis Phillips needs running straight cards to stay alive.
Turn card is an ace, and that closes the door right there. Eastgate wins the pot, and Dennis Phillips' dreams of claiming a poker world championship are over.
Phillips started this final table as chip leader. He followed that dream all the way to 3rd place. He and his supporters just lit up this poker theater.
Dennis wins over $4.5 million for 3rd place. Well done. He said he couldn't wipe the smile off his face the last 4 months, and he's not about to lose it right now.
See, now I can play golf tomorrow.
With Phillips's exit, the stage was set for the ultimate showdown. Peter Eastgate versus Ivan Demidov. 2 young titans, each with a chance to make history. Eastgate, the emotionless Dane, was one step closer to becoming the youngest WSOP main event champion ever. Demidov, the Russian phenom, was on a roll after his deep run in the World Series of Poker Europe main event. The final chapter of the 2008 WSOP was about to be written, and it promised to be unforgettable. The final hand began innocently enough. Demidov, itching to seize control, opened with ace-9, a decent heads-up hand. He raised to $2 million, his signature aggression on full display. Eastgate glanced at his cards, 7-4 of diamonds. To the untrained eye, it was garbage. To Eastgate, an opportunity. He called. Eastgate knew Demidov's aggression could be weaponized against him. The flop came, 10 of diamonds, king of diamonds, 7 of clubs. For Eastgate, this was a dream flop. He'd paired his 7 and picked up a flush draw. But instead of betting, Eastgate did something unexpected. He checked. Demidov, usually a predator in these spots, hesitated. Was Eastgate weak or setting a trap? Demidov checked back, a rare moment of caution. The turn, jack of diamonds, a seismic shift. Eastgate makes flush. Demidov gets useless straight draw. Eastgate bet $2.5 million. To Demidov, this screamed weakness. He's probing, Demidov must have thought. He doesn't have it. So Demidov raised to $8 million, trying to bully Eastgate off the hand. But Eastgate wasn't budging. He called, keeping Demidov on the hook. The river, 3 of spades, a brick. Eastgate checked again, a move so calculated it could have been scripted. Demidov, now convinced Eastgate was weak, shoved $12 million into the pot. Eastgate snap called, revealing his flush. Demidov mucked his cards and the crowd went wild. This hand wasn't just about the chips, it was about progress. Eastgate's check call on the river was a masterstroke. By letting Demidov bluff into his monster hand, he maximized value while minimizing risk. The psychological impact was immediate. Demidov, known for his unshakable focus, began second-guessing his decisions. Eastgate, meanwhile, stacked his chips with the calm precision of a surgeon. The next hand began with Eastgate holding ace-5 offsuit. He limped in for $500,000, a small bet designed to lure Demidov into the pot. Demidov, with 4-2 of hearts, checked his option. The flop came deuce-king-3. Demidov paired his deuce, while Eastgate picked up a wheel draw, needing a 4 to complete a straight. Demidov checked, and Eastgate bet $1.5 million, testing the waters. Demidov called, and the turn brought a 4, completing Eastgate's straight. Demidov, now holding 2 pair, deuces and 4s, checked. Eastgate bet $2 million, and Demidov raised to $6 million, committing half his stack.
Eastgate's gotta figure his wheel is good.
Demidov first to act.
I'm all in. I call.
All in and an insta-call, and this is the moment. 22-year-old Peter Eastgate steps into poker history. Peter Eastgate is our 2008 main event champion.
From unknown to unreal again at the World Series. Peter Eastgate, 22 years old, the youngest main event champion ever.
Ivan Demidov, what a player this guy turned out to be this year. Second place wins $5.8 million.
He outplayed the pros, stayed calm under pressure, and walked away with over $9 million. It was a night no one would ever forget. But the crazy thing is, his record didn't even last a full year, because in 2009, another young gun came out of nowhere, outplayed the pros, and shattered Eastgate's record. So click on this video right here if you want to see how the 21-year-old Joe Cata pulled off the greatest poker comeback in main event history. We'll see you there.